I'm a 23-year-old female and I've always been a jogger. I generally try to run a 5K at least 4 times a week. I currently live in the Seattle, Washington area. And it can be a really creepy place to run sometimes because the forest is very dense, and the sky is usually gray, so there isn't much light on my favorite path. Even in the middle of the day. There's a reason that people like Ted Bundy and Gary Ridgway thrived in Washington, but I've never been an easily scared person. And up until this one time, I've never felt the need to be scared running on my usual route. It was around November of last year, 2013, when I went for a run. It was a typical dreary day and slightly raining. Again, normal for Seattle. So the woods were pretty dark around the trail. As it was running, I randomly tripped, and when flying about 4 feet, I could instantly tell that this wasn't because I had tripped over my feet and never hair on my body was standing on, and I looked down on my legs, and there was a gash across each shin that was dripping blood. I turned around, still sitting on the ground, and could see that there was a wire stretched across the trail. It was then I noticed a young guy, like maybe 18 and 19, was emerging from the woods and the left side of the trail and was making his way towards me with the creepiest grin ever on his face. And he was holding one of those giant kitchen knives that only chefs seem to use. I backpedaled like 2 feet away from him on the trail. And finally my shoe found its footing and I stood up and just ran as hard as possible away from him. I don't think I've ever run that fast for that long. Maybe a mile later was the exit to the trail. So I was back in a fairly residential area, but I sprinted all the way home. I don't think he chased me for very long, because he was a chubby-looking guy. But I honestly believe if I had been stung for longer, or not as good of a runner, that I would have been murdered and left in the woods somewhere. Since then, I'm a strictly residential area runner unless I have someone with me. It was honestly the scariest thing I have ever experienced. And I still have nightmares about the situation, but usually my nightmares end differently. Like, what if you had caught me? What if I had broken my leg? It's the worst. Also in the right light. If you look really closely, you can still see the faint scar lines across my shins. I used to live in Orlando in a somewhat shady part of town. The 5 deadbolts in the apartment door should have raised some flags when I was a student. And there were a lot of students in the area, and I was young and not yet weary, or less. Nice part of town bordered a very nice part of town. That was a 4 to 6 lane road that ran to the area and a jogging path that ran alongside of it. Our apartment complex was right next to the road in the trail. And a little further down was my local gas station where I would walk once a day to buy cigarettes and other things. Because of the layout, it was easy for me to walk out of my door, step on the path and walk the 10 minutes to the gas station. Walking through the complex took longer, often ended up taking this walk at night. Sure, it was a girl walking alone, but the path bordered this huge road with a lot of traffic. And right across the street was a busy strip mall with fast food places and such. So it wasn't like a dark path in the woods or anything. I always brought pepper spray, paid attention to my surroundings, etc. So one night I head to the gas station and around 11 p.m. As I'm walking along the path, I hear something behind me. Turning around, I notice about 30 yards behind me, there's a car on the trail, like I had to have pulled off the road and pulled onto the path. I'm stopped and staring, and a guy gets out of the driver's side and starts walking around the grass between the trail and the road as though he's looking for something. Oh, I think something must have fallen out of his car and he's pulled over to search for it. And keep walking. As I'm walking, I'm hearing something again behind me. I stop and turn, guy's now 15 yards behind me, still no headlights, and I turn as he stops the car, or he stops the car as I turn. Again, he gets out and looks like he's searching for something in the grass. But he's closer now, and I'm a little creeped out. I'm not close enough to the gas station. So I pick up the pace. The next time I turn, he's even closer. He stops again when I look, but he doesn't get out of the car. Now, I don't want to just take off to let him know he scared me, but I am now power walking. My pepper spray is in my hand. But what does pepper spray do against a car? I throw a look over my shoulder and he's only a few yards behind me. It doesn't stop this time. But distance is closing. Screw it. I take off. I judge the distance to the gas station to be too far along the trail. But there's some trees and stuff on the other side of the path from the road. So I bought into them through them. And through a little ditch towards the light of the station, which is now right in front of me. It felt like the dude in the car was going fast. I look behind me as I'm running through the ditch and I see through the space in the trees. His car slows down and he's cruising along the section of the path I left. I continued my sprint to the gas station where I know I'll feel safe. The owners and employees all know me. I make it out front and I'm catching my breath. Watching the part of the jogging path that meets the intersection. I see the car clearly for the first time. It's one of those brown car-truck combos with a tan stripe along the side, drives up the trail to the intersection, flips his lights on and floors stones to the main road, disappearing. Up until that point I was running on a mix of adrenaline and feeling that maybe I'm being stupid, but better safe than sorry feeling. Once I made it inside the gas station, I pretty much broke down shaking. To this day, I still don't know what the guy's intentions were. Maybe he didn't even see me and was just looking for something. Maybe he was planning to hit me with his car and drag me off. Maybe he was just in a hole that was trying to scare me. Either way, I had my boyfriend come get me from the gas station. And I never walked alone at night again. I live in a subdivision outside of my town, took more subs due east and woodland immediately west of me. Rather limited activity aside from residential. I decided one day that I needed to start jogging. I wanted to get in better shape, feel good enough. So that summer nightly, that's what I would do. Around 10 or so I'd go out and jog around the neighborhood. One night in particular, I was out jogging and decided I'd take a break beneath a streetlight near my neighborhood's edge. A car drove by me. I remember distinctly what it was, a red Dodge Challenger. I'd never seen it around here before and it was in amazing condition. I drove by slowly through the tinted windows. I couldn't make out a woman's silhouette. After driving by slowly they peeled off. The noise startled me. I started back home and as I round the corner to face my street, there sits the red car. No biggie. Maybe they've just got something to do. I realized that there were two fingers in the car now. I swapped sides of the street and began to walk down the sidewalk opposite. As I did, the passenger side door swung open, and a man slid across the car's hood and bolted towards me. Instinctively I ran towards my home, him some yards behind. Though I knew I wouldn't be able to unlock the door in time to get through. I simply ran. There was a fence, deadhead, and I hopped it, landing in someone's backyard. I crouched and the man bolted past. I laid there for a solid 30 minutes before his heavy footsteps approached. He stood and then walked away. I heard a car door open and shut and a car pulled away. I hopped back over and walked through a wooded patch to get home and got back, sat in my room and straight up cried. I've actually seen the vehicle driving around here since, usually in the late evening. I'm not really sure what to do if I come across it again. I'm an athletic, 19-year-old female. I was 18 when it happened. I live in a really small town with maybe less than 10,000 residents. And there are no streetlights where I live. Basically, everyone has an outside light on their front yards. And at nighttime, they have to turn it on to provide lights for the street. And believe me, it doesn't light up that much. It was around May of last year when it happened. And since I was having a very hard time falling asleep, I used to go on nighttime jogging, saw the time between 1 and 3 a.m. It helped me fall asleep. My boyfriend and dad were always really concerned about that because it didn't sound safe for me to be jogging around the neighborhood super late at night. But like I said, I live in a really small town. And I always thought nothing bad could happen to me until that night. So it was a normal night. Kind of cold. Since I remember having my raincoat on, I tied my shoes and went on my almost daily nighttime jogging routine, I'd say probably around 1 or 2 a.m. I ran the same distance and took the same path. But for some reason I ran faster than usual and had to take a short walking break to catch my breath. I stopped in front of a park a couple of streets away from my house and started walking back toward my house. But that's when I noticed him. He was standing in the middle of the park with a dog that looked like a husky or something as big as that. Like I said before, there are no street lights, no lights in the park either. Plus the street I was on only had 2 houses, so they weren't providing that much light. So I really couldn't tell if he was looking at me or even facing me at all. Obviously, that kind of shocked me to see someone wandering in a park so late at night. And I was not used to seeing people in the streets around these hours. But I shook it off and kept walking to head back home. But after a few steps ahead, I started to feel uneasy and weirded out. So I looked over my shoulder, and I saw him walking behind me still holding his dog on leash. He was approximately 2 meters behind me. My heartbeat was already pretty high from running. But I felt like it got even higher, didn't feel safe at all. And even though I tried to keep calm, I just couldn't. So I started running as fast as I could without looking behind me. But to my horror, he started running too. I could hear his footsteps behind me. After what felt like ages of sprinting through different streets, I couldn't take it anymore as it was already exhausted from my jog. So I turned into a driveway after taking a sharp turn into another street and hit crouch behind the bushes on the front yard. Not even 5 seconds later, I heard him take the turn and run past where I was hiding. And God! He then stopped running a few meters. I irrationally thought he knew where I was, because my heart was beating so hard. I could hear it in front of where I was and started looking everywhere. Left, right, as if he was looking for someone. And then he finally turned around and I got to see him a little bit better. I definitely couldn't tell how old he was. But considering he kept up with my running, he was probably less than 40 or so. And just in really good shape. He was wearing all black hoodie, pants, and cap. His dog looked like a husky mixed with something else. He then turned back and started running again. I stayed behind the bush until I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. God, I even stayed a good 10 minutes or so after that just in case. I was so afraid I didn't want to come out, but I had to because I was still very vulnerable in the streets and he could come back at any time. It then took all the courage and energy I had left. I came out of where I was hiding and stuff sprinting back the opposite direction he went to head back home to where I made it safely, and promised myself never to run late at night again. During high school when I still live, my parents had lived in a small neighborhood surrounded by woods. I would often go jogging on a trail that ran up through the woods and ended at a trailer park. I'd usually go towards the afternoon, but on this particular day, I didn't have work or school, so I decided to jog early in the morning. About halfway through the trail, there's a large clearing to the left of the trail, and the areas right before and after the trail are long and narrow stretches of woods. Plus, the clearing itself is enclosed by a tree-filled hilly area. Usually when I'm reached the clearing, the amount of visible light is the same when compared to the other parts of the trail. But since it was relatively dark when I finally reached the clearing, there was a flood of light that lit up the surrounding area, which made me observe the scenery more than usual. I have terrible eyesight and wasn't wearing glasses or contacts, so most of the scenery was just an indistinguishable blurry spot. Towards the end of the clearing, I noticed a very distinct blurry shape and the distance that seemed off. It was wide and smooth looking, unlike the surrounding bushes. It also looked like 2 different shapes with one line on top of the other. I completely disregarded this and jogged to the end of the trail. My jogging routine, including running up the hill as well as back down. This meant I would have to go past the clearing twice. On my way back down the trail approaching the clearing, I started to hear a strange, indescribable wailing type noise, and it got louder and louder till I finally reached the clearing again, until I realized it was coming from the strange blur I noticed earlier. I started to come to an almost complete stop trying to figure out what that blur was. When half the blur stood up while the other half stayed on the ground. I just stared dumbfounded, still having no idea what I was looking at. When I realized it was a human standing up and an animal, which was the source of the noise I heard earlier laying down. I started to slowly start jogging again when the human blur started to shake rapidly. As soon as I noticed the blur was now sprinting at me, I freaking booked it for the rest of the trail. Not stopping till I knew I was long gone from that clearing. I still don't know what that thing was doing. But I didn't run on that trail for a long time after this. But I'm pretty sure the human was doing something very, very wrong with whatever animal that was. This happened tonight while I was jogging with my best friend and mom, 2 females in the late 20s and 1 female in her 50s. My best friend and I like to jog late at night since we live in Florida and it's cooler at night. And there aren't a lot of people out at the time. We both just recently started the C25K program. And since we are overweight and shy, we don't want to jog in front of a bunch of people yet. My mom goes with us, and she walks while we jog. Tonight, there were a few people out there besides us. It was an older lady walking her dog and a couple of teenage girls who were just walking and talking about nothing really. And about 3/4 of the way through our jog, 2 guys showed up. They were probably late teens, early 20s. We only had to pass them once, but we got a weird vibe off of them. The teenage girls probably felt it too because they left shortly after passing them. We were almost done with our cool-down walk when we noticed that they were standing up. They were watching us rather intently and they were waiting for us to pass by again. We decided to turn around and finish our cool-down in another direction. When the mom said she needed to find a restroom ASAP, we cut her cool-down short by 1 minute. As we were leaving, the guys walked up into the parking lot a bit and watched the car drive by. It was rather unsettling. And it got even worse when I noticed something shining in the one guy's hand. It appeared to be something long and sharp. I'm just glad we got out of there when we did, and hopefully they won't be there the next time we go for a run, if we ever do. This happened to me about a month and a half ago. For some context, I enjoy working out 4 or 5 times a week. I go to a CrossFit gym that is relatively small, so the warm-up rounds are usually done outside. The gym is near a street that's surrounded by trees at both sides, and that road stretches for about a mile, which is a great place for the gym goers to run on and is in fact encouraged on some days. I'm also a short female, and I don't really look fit since I'm on the chubby side. This, however, always gave me a false sense of security since in my head, I didn't look like the traditional standard of beauty. Therefore, I wouldn't be a focal point for any creeps. Clearly, I was wrong. I got to the gym this morning. When I read the routine on the board, the warm-up said we had to go down the previously mentioned road. It was actually a pretty warm and sunny day, so I decided to go and do it. It wasn't the first time I went alone down the road. And my biggest worry so far was getting caught up in the rain, which wasn't a concern. On this particular morning, I grabbed my phone and my headphones to listen to some music on my warm-up jog, as per usual, and immediately went out of the gym to begin the small walk between the gym building and the beginning of that road. Halfway there, this car passes by me and slows down, driving at the speed I was walking. He honks his horn several times to get my attention, and I turned to look thinking he needed directions or something. But when I looked, he gave me this wide, unsettling grin, waved at me and drove off. At the moment, I didn't think anything of it since as a female, I do get the occasional honker inappropriate comment about my bounce, and things like that when I'm outside warming up. So I simply shrugged it off, turned up the volume of my music and continued heading towards the intersection that connects to the road. What started to give me creepy vibes was that as I'm walking to said intersection, I noticed the car waiting at the red light. As soon as that light turned green, the car did a U-turn and headed back towards my direction, once more slowing down his speed. He looks at me with that creepy grin. I'm the up and down and making me feel exposed. I felt my heart began to race. But I tried to ignore it since he was going in the opposite direction as me now. And besides, it was the middle of the day where other cars were passing by, so he wouldn't try anything else. At least that's what I tried to convince myself of. But this time I reached the intersection. So I turned onto the road and began to jog alongside it. I was a little concerned by this dude literally going out of his way to look at me. But I tried to concentrate on keeping my pace and my breathing at a steady rate and using my music to keep distracted to not 2 minutes had passed when I see on the opposite side of the road that same car slowing down beside me again. This meant that he had made another U-turn somewhere, took the light at the intersection again, in turn the same direction I was jogging towards. The man driving looked right at me with that stupid grin. He said some words to me that I didn't really catch since I had my volume pretty high before he sped off once more. Alright, at this point, I'm starting to freak out because he's gone out of his way twice. I'm hyper aware of my heartbeat as I feel a wave of panic began to wash over me. I suddenly realized that I'm just starting my jog down this road where there are no buildings around, no place to hide. And I'm completely alone. Rent the hill of the road, there is another intersection that can be seen from where I currently am. But something was telling me that this dude was going to make yet another U-turn and make a pass at me again. I see another jogger a little up ahead. And since I really want to do this workout, I decided to catch up to him. In my head, I figured that he must have been one of the gym goers too if he's running up that road. So maybe I could jog with him and have some company. I pick up my pace to get to him faster. Eventually I do, but I don't recognize him. Remember, my gym is rather small, so the faces get pretty familiar rather quickly. Still, I hoped he was maybe a new member or just one of the few I hadn't yet met. I just wanted an excuse not to be alone. So I asked him if by any chance he goes to the gym down the road, not wanting to be too specific in case he ended up also being the creep. But he tells me no crap. I thank him anyway, decided to bolt back down to the gym. There is no way I'm running up this lonely street by myself with some stranger following me in his car. God knows what his intentions were with me, but considering his expression wasn't willing to take the risk and find out. As I'm heading down the road on my way back, the car passes me yet again. Just as I expected, he had gotten to the second intersection and made a third U-turn if you're counting. Still that creepy grin on his lips, still slowing down his speed to drive at my pace. His eyes looking at me as if I was absolutely naked in front of him. He was closer to me now, and I could see through the window that while his left hand was on the wheel, his right hand was on his lap, gripping something. I quickly looked away, fearing that what I thought I saw was actually what I saw. I didn't want to confirm my suspicions, but I was clearly shaken. My jog turned into running when he speeds off again. I'm literally on the verge of a panic attack, only focusing on how I was going to reach the gym safely. Sure, it wasn't that far away, but I obviously could not run a car. I turn off my music and call my best friend on my phone. I don't know why I did that, since she's overseas studying and there was no way for her to help me. I should have instead called the police, but my panic-ridden brain was only thinking about getting back safe and having someone keep me company, even if only on the phone. In the meantime, while I wait for her to pick up the phone, I noticed the first intersection up ahead. But to my horror, the car was on the very left lane waiting for the light to turn green. Finally, my friend picks up the phone and hearing her voice helps alleviate some of my panic. My eyes were trying to focus on both the car and where I was stepping as I ran. I needed to be careful, of course. And then the light turned green. The car began to move and yes, did a fourth U-turn. I'm trying my hardest to explain the situation to my best friend with breathless, panicky words. When I see the man passed by me again with those eyes, that grin that sent chills down my spine every time I think about it. Luckily, I was nearing the intersection. And I could already see my gym about 400 meters away. My best friend kept telling me to breathe and try to calm down. She knew I couldn't get anxious, then I needed to be safe first 200 more meters. I'm searching around to see if I can spot that car again. I can only hear my ragged breath, my heart, and my friend's voice trying to soothe me. Every car that passes by me makes me flinch. I was too jumpy to panic by the whole ordeal. Nothing like this had ever happened to me before. 50 more meters. I'm so close that one last burst of adrenaline makes me run even faster. I finally reach the building and climb up the steps to the second floor where the gym is and burst through the doors. Finally, I made it. I was safe. My body begins to relax as soon as I entered into the familiar, comforting space. My adrenaline was crashing fast, leaving more room for my anxiety to settle when I tell my friend goodbye, since I wanted to tell my coach about the situation and quickly hang up the phone before he could find my coach. However, I fell into a full-blown panic attack. I started to hyperventilate. My body was shaking so badly that I collapsed into a ball on the floor and sobbed uncontrollably, not caring that everyone was watching me. All I could do was try to reassure myself that I was now safe and that everything would be all right. But I am never going down that road alone again.